I'm Lila, and I'm horizontal.
And I'm Mirelle, and I'm horizontal with Lila.
Oh yeah, this is too hot. I need to open my robe.
It is pretty hot.
Sex positive culture.
It's my body to give.
Are threesome gifts a thing?
Taking a breath.
I like your bed.
Horizontal.
Horizontal.
This is Horizontal with Lila.
I like your bed.
Thank you.
I've never been up here before.
This is Horizontal with Lila. Horizontal is the podcast of intimate conversations about sex, love, and relationships that's entirely recorded while lying down. I invite you to eavesdrop on stories that might seem almost too personal for you to hear, which is, of course, exactly why I want you to hear them. Most episodes are recorded in bed at my home, Hacienda Villa, a sex-positive, intentional community in Bushwick, Brooklyn.
Thank you.
You're definitely the softest guest that has visited.
I love that we can see the snow falling from your window.
I know, it's gorgeous. It's really a winter wonderland here today.
You have a much better view than I do.
And look, the train's coming around so you can see it, which feels always very indie movie style Brooklyn to me.
Yes.
And idyllic, and aside from the scritch, which actually I'm not hearing right now.
Oh, good.
But
Just for us.
aside from that, it's usually just lovely to see it.
Mm.
And very New York.
So New York. Hello.
Hello.
In this episode, I lie down with my housemate, Mirelle. Mirelle is a sensual nurturer, sometimes nicknamed the mama of the villa, at other times the MVP, and a member of what she calls the Villa Dream Team, a group of my housemates, or villains, who provide a kind of fantasy fulfillment service, curating scenes and initiating people into sensations, kinks, settings, configurations, and stories that they've previously only dreamed about. Mirelle is profoundly and happily polyamorous. She has many relationships, many loves. She's an outstanding cook, a connoisseur of delight, and somehow manages to lovingly sustain an incredibly intricate and extensive web of partners and lovers with such tender attentiveness to the way people wish to be loved that I feel deeply impressed by the way that she relates. In fact, I think Mirelle could teach a multi-part course on intimacy. This episode was recorded in my bed at the villa on a snow day. We talk about love languages, overcoming shame, feeding your delight, comets, fantasies, and fear, mine. Come lie down with us, and you'll wish your head was on the pillow next to Mirelle.
Tell a little bit about how you came to move into the villa.
I would love to. What really drew me, first of all, was the idea of having a home where the inner workings were all intertwined and the people in it work together to make it feel like home. That's what home is for me, I guess, is working together and participating in something greater than oneself, and being able to do that in a place of comfort and relaxation, I guess, is really nice. But that's what drew me.
So a longing for community,
Yeah,
really.
longing for community more than anything. And I think that the sex positive nature of this location, this particular community, has also drawn me because I feel that I found my community, my outer community, among the sex positive, sex celebratory, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's because it's more than being positive about it. We actually celebrate it here.
Exactly.
And that's what really resonated with me, I think, about this particular community. And we celebrate all the different ways that we enjoy sex. I actually once asked some friends in a car ride, we had a long 13-hour road trip, all the ways that they tend to play. And because I was exploring this idea of what play means. And there was quite a number of different responses. There were some people who said they like to play via touch and movement through dance. There were some who said they liked to play verbally, like tell jokes and bicker and banter a little bit. And just the variety of that was really fascinating to hear. And it was so innocent as well. When I think of the word, well, when I use the word play, sometimes I use it in a sexy context. And
I was
that's not
really
always the case.
interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
When I heard that for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
people referring to sex as play.
Yeah.
I think that was at my first sex party that I ever went to,
Mm-hmm.
which was chemistry.
Mm.
And I was hired to give Thai body work for
Oh,
tips.
excellent.
And I, at first was a little taken aback. And I'm like, okay, do I have to touch anybody? Do they have to be naked? I mean, well, obviously touch, but do I have to touch people's genitals? Do I have to be naked? Do they have to be naked? And
Mm-hmm.
it was really just like most play parties that we're familiar with. It was about my comfort level and what I was okay with. So I asked the guys to keep their underwear on
Yeah.
while I worked on them, and that made me feel comfortable. And I wore a onesie.
That's playful.
And
That's very playful.
I wore a onesie, and I think that's in the context where I first heard play used to describe sex.
Yeah.
I think this is a very playful place. We're just
Yes,
generally
I
joking with
agree.
each other and laughing a
Mhm.
lot. I'm so grateful for all the laughter we have here.
Oh, me too. And that was, another thing I was longing for was more play in my life, and why I had asked around how different people play so that I could connect with them in that way. And when I arrived here, I noticed all of that playfulness. I noticed, just the joy between people and the celebration of those, shared moments. And I was alluding to the fact that the way that people tend to play in such a variety of ways is similar to the way that if we just look at our sexuality, we tend to play with that in a wide range of ways too. There's so many different ways to show who we are sexually and to play with that, I guess.
It's so interesting to me about you that I feel like you're constantly doing research in this really beautiful, natural way that people wouldn't call research. Like when you tried to figure out what all of our love languages were so that you could best love us. I I was so impressed. It's brilliant. It's simple but brilliant, because if you know how people want to be loved, you can choose to love them that way instead of a way in which you understand best and they don't understand.
Yeah.
And that's really, maybe that's you doing an act of service. That's you offering an act of service.
Yeah. I think it was especially important to me to do that so that I could most quickly connect with people and feel at home and help others feel at home. That's a big thing, is I wanted to know what helps people feel at home. And I think part of home is love, right? That's maybe the biggest part.
Probably the main
The
ingredient.
main ingredient to home is love. And yeah, when when you feel loved, you feel at home. And I've found in my travels, in my many places that I've lived, I have felt at home even when I'm not inside of a house-shaped box. I've felt at home next to a person on a mountain. I've
Mhm.
felt at home in in a lake,
Mm.
swimming side by side with friends. I've felt at home on a long car ride. Those are some of my favorite moments,
I love
actually.
those too.
Yeah.
That's it. That's
Mhm.
really it. I've visited several other intentional communities,
Mhm.
and when they are struggling,
Mhm.
it's a lack of love.
Yes. Yes.
It's a lack of love.
Yeah. And I think and maybe more than that, there might be ingredients sprinkled about that we don't want there, like little bits of contempt or,
Oh, yeah.
some form of discomfort at least. But
Because if we
yeah.
can go back to that love, the love itself can be part of our mutual purpose. I
Mhm.
was reading, okay, I didn't get through it yet, but I was reading Crucial Conversations,
Mm.
and it helped me actually in a conversation I had with one of our housemates where I made the effort to establish mutual purpose.
Mm.
What I want for me out of this conversation, what I want for you out of this conversation, what I want for us out of this conversation. And I know that we both care about having a comfortable, positive home environment, that we
Yes.
both care so much about community. And when I was able to establish that, I managed to say some very difficult things that I felt needed to be said
That's huge.
because I could replace community with love.
Yeah.
We we care. Our mutual purpose was we care about the love in this house.
Yeah. The love in this place, this space, whatever the space is.
Yeah.
And, right now this is the space. And
And
when
the
there's
space
love
between
between.
us is troubled.
Mhm.
The water between us is troubled
Mhm.
and it will ripple outwards.
Mhm. That's when it doesn't feel like home.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I,
so that makes sense.
yeah, I also had a great, great longing for home that drove me here. I
Wow.
think because my parents got divorced when I was 12 and I lived with my mother, but those apartments that we lived in didn't really feel very, very home-like.
Mm.
And then I was in dorms that didn't feel like home. I wasn't even friends with my dorm mates.
Yeah.
And maybe the first time I felt that home again since I was a child was after college when I resettled in an apartment in Greenpoint and moved in with a former best friend that I had. And that felt like home. That's when I started doing my Naked Lady clothing swaps.
Those are
And
the best.
and we used to clean the apartment to Jack Johnson. And at Jack Johnson and the Postal Service. And, 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 and still every time I hear those albums, I think, oh, cleaning with with my former best friend,
Yes.
it was it was such fun, and it was a way that we could not hate cleaning, and and it really did feel like home. We hosted people, and we
Mm.
had people over for dinner, and we had parties, and we had Naked Ladies clothing swaps, and
And I think that when you're doing that, when you're hosting people, it must feel like you're sharing the love that's in your home
yes,
with them,
that's what's so
right?
delightful about the events that we have here.
Yes.
It feels like, and I think we needed that time. People, it did cause some strife that we didn't have the basement event space ready for so long,
Yeah.
but actually maybe we weren't ready for it.
Right.
Morel, I think maybe we weren't bonded enough for that, because the main thing that people say when they come here is, wow, it feels so good here. I feel so comfortable. I feel comfortable to talk about my sexual fears and feel comfortable to talk about the relationship that I want that I've never had, and to explore and to try things I've never tried, and to try things in front of people, and to have sex in front of people. and I think that feeling of not just an event space that people populate, but they are stepping into a home that we have woven the fabric of for 2.5 years.
Yes.
And it sounds so cheesy, but the fabric is woven with love. It's woven with our love for each other and our support of each other, our support of each other's growth and dreams and sexy times and orgasms.
Yay.
And that's what it's built on.
I felt that when I arrived, the first meeting that I came to. I felt that. One of the housemates opened up about something that he was feeling, you know, not so great about. And everyone heard him and received that and sent their love. And I felt that.
Mm.
And I knew this was the right place.
I'm so glad you got to feel that. I think you might be, maybe one other housemate, but you might be the first one who got to step in when it really felt interlocked. When we really put the puzzle pieces in the right order and in the right place. And it seemed that finally everybody could get along and could have some love for each other.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you got to experience that.
Well, me too. Lots of benefits on my end.
Mirelle, we've had a conversation before about the word slut.
We have.
We were talking about the ethical slut, and I was saying that I was saying I don't identify as a slut, but I think part of it is that I still don't like the word.
Well, did you think of a better one since then? That's why we talked about it. Right?
Oh man, no, I don't think I have. Maybe one of my listeners will have a better word than slut to identify a woman who is, or a person, right? It could be any person, a person who is happily sexually expressed in great frequency, with great frequency, with great frequency and variety.
That's the key. Yeah.
But you said you do identify as a slut.
Well, I think simply because I've reframed my thinking about the word to allow it to mean something like what you just said. I think
How did you do that?
How did I do that?
How did you do that?
I'll tell you. I mean, it's pretty Pavlovian, actually. It's pretty like cognitive behavioral training.
Please tell me.
You know, when I'm with someone I really like, and the first time it happened, actually, I was just really enjoying a scene I was having. When I was first called a slut during a scene, it was something I was really enjoying already. And then the way that this man said it, you slut. You love this, you slut. Don't you? And I did.
Yes, sir. Yes, yes, I do.
Yes, I do. And I said thank you because I knew that would bring me good things. And you know, the combination of that word, the delivery of that word, the energy behind it, the whole mood of the room and the experience and the charge between us was elaborately gorgeous and fun.
So
and
this was
sexy and
in public at a party?
It was not. It was in private. And
can you set the scene for me?
Ooh. So I feel shy.
Oh, you look adorable when you're shy.
So it was in private, but it was with more than one person. One person was holding my whole torso back, and the other person was at my knees, which were raised. And the scene had sort of evolved on its own. It wasn't planned, and it was an after party. Actually, it was an after party, but it still wasn't in public, say. So I was laid out on a couch, and this man was holding me, holding my torso behind me, holding my arms back. I couldn't really do much. I couldn't move or struggle, and I kind of played at struggling because I enjoy trying to
Yeah.
break free.
Oh, that's so fun.
And then the other man was facing me, and he was looking deeply into my eyes and watching my every movement and watching my every, almost as though he was watching my every thought. He was watching my responses. He was responding to them and listening with all of himself, it seemed. And he was holding a magic wand. And I don't normally enjoy such intensity from vibration, but he held it against different parts of my body that were able to tolerate that. And
Like your
like
thigh?
my thigh, like my sort of the tricep area of my arm that was raised a little bit, along my breast, and sort of sweeping down along my body and in a teasing way.
Mm-hmm.
And then brushed over me where I was most sensitive, and just kept saying, "You're loving this, aren't you, you slut?" And I was loving it. And I loved the tantalizing nature of that whole experience leading into it. And I just remembered more. The best part about it was that once he was directly, well, not quite directly on my clit, but he was able to navigate like around in areas that I was tolerating, and he saw how the pleasure was building for me and saw how he could guide it and continue there. He, for the first time ever, and actually I think the only time still, I was able to climax with this magic wand. And he looks at me again and he said, "You loved that. You can take more. You're not done yet." He said, "You're not done yet, you slut." And I thought I was done. But he decided that I wasn't.
Ooh.
And he wasn't typically the dominant type, but that came out of him in that moment. And it felt like he was telling me, not putting me in a box or, defining who I was necessarily. But when he was telling me that, it felt like he was acknowledging that I was in this state of bliss, and that I was a fully seen human in my, relishing in my pleasure, just deep in my pleasure. And he could see that and appreciate that. And he put a name to it, something that may not otherwise have a name, And so to me, that in that moment, the word slut, or in all those moments, the word slut took on a different meaning, and took on one that was positive and pleasurable, really extraordinarily pleasurable, like push through the upper limit pleasurable.
I have never heard slut said the way you just said it several times. I've never heard it said slut. I've never heard it said like that. I've heard it said matter-of-factly, right? Kenneth calls himself a slut all the time. I've heard it said in a derogatory fashion, of course, as most females have. I've never heard it said like that. So then did you feel that you were able to reclaim it because you remembered how he said it later on?
Yes. In the moment, it surprised me. And the slight shock of it was also enough to rile me up a little. And, you tend to feel the same thing in your body when you're you experience in your body the same sensation, I think, when you're slightly concerned or, surprised,
maybe.
shocked, and when you're excited, aroused. So that just added to what I was experiencing already. In a sort of the way that I tend to like intense sensations, it was an intense psychological sensation on top of the rest of what was going on. And since then, it has been much more delicious to hear from other people and from myself when I say, yes, I'm such a slut.
It really does sound good when you say it.
Thank you.
And is that what reclaiming words is all about? I mean, I was going to ask, is it even possible to reclaim a word? I wonder if you can only reclaim it in the spheres in which other people have also reclaimed it. Because if somebody calls me a slut on the street, somebody yells at me, I'm not going to feel the same way about that word.
No.
I won't feel like I've reclaimed that word. It can't hurt me anymore.
Yeah.
It's so much about intention with words, right?
It is. But just in the way that you would say, there are lots of words that have different meanings based on how you say them. And I suppose what's required is, should we pause?
I think someone's shoveling outside.
How sweet. What's required is some compartmentalization and contextualization.
But if you have to compartmentalize,
Yeah.
Mirelle, does that mean that you have reclaimed it?
I would say I've reclaimed it for myself, because my first thought when I think of the word, the first thing that comes to my mind is pleasure.
Is that memory? Okay.
Because that was so much more intense of an experience around the word, that the meaning rang true. And it's much deeper. The meaning is much deeper than the meaning of someone else saying it casually.
So that
because they don't understand that level of depth that I have around it.
It rewired you.
I believe so, absolutely. Just the way that I'm able to say love, I love you to someone, and that has a deep meaning for me. And I'm able to say it in Spanish as well, and it feels similarly deep, because I once had a very deep love with someone who spoke mostly Spanish. But in any other language that I learned how to say I love you, it doesn't feel like the level of depth that it feels true, and the level of meaning, the depth of meaning that it has feels deeper in English and in Spanish. And I suppose similar to that, I have in my mind these words that have depth to them because of my great experiences around them. And the more experience I have around it, the more it evolves, the more deeply it goes. I don't know how to, the deeper it goes, I guess. I don't know how to describe it, but
it becomes more profound to you.
It does. It becomes more profound to me.
But when you said that it happens you reclaimed it in a sort of cognitive behavioral way. What do you mean by that?
So I mean that it was paired with an in the moment, highly positive, pleasurable experience. And the two are connected in my mind. It's an experience I had around.
So, okay. So now you hear it and you think,
When I hear it in a similar context.
Right.
When I'm telling you about it, I'm thinking,
Right.
I wouldn't necessarily use that word around any person, but when I feel that I trust the person, I feel maybe a little excited to tell them. I feel a little bit vulnerable. Similar feelings that I felt in that moment that I was called it
Mm-hmm.
in that way, then I can share that same sentiment or at least something akin to it.
Yeah.
But in other contexts, it might take on a different meaning. I would have to really, and I do, bring myself to that feeling of I am a woman who experiences pleasure and loves experiencing pleasure when I say the word slut.
And that's what you're talking about. That's the behavioral shift. You're
Yes.
saying, I love this.
Yes.
This is good for me.
Mhm.
This is meaningful, and I like what it means.
Mhm.
Okay.
And my inner goddess is dancing. And
I feel
Yes.
like your inner goddess dances a lot. A lot. And I'm so impressed with your capacity for delight and pleasure.
Hmm.
And where does that come from?
I think it's always been in me. I don't I don't know. I also think that the way that you tend to a garden with water and with attention, I give my delight and my pleasure regular attention and
Mm.
I tend to it. I put a lot of focus on it, I suppose. I don't tend to do things that I don't find some enjoyment doing, and if I don't inherently find enjoyment in it, I will look for ways to make it enjoyable to me, to make it glorious. And I can transform things in that way. I think transform and create experiences for myself that I want to be having.
I think that's one of the most miraculous things about you and about being in relationship to you.
Wow.
It's inspiring.
Thank you.
And I wonder, what does it say about your upper limit? Does it mean that you've just practiced raising it, or that you didn't really make a low cap when you were a child? The upper limit from conscious loving is that concept that and I know I did it. Can't remember because I have large swaths of my childhood that are pretty blank, that I can't remember almost anything. So I can't remember when I made the decision. I don't have an anecdote or a story. But at some point in my childhood, I made a decision that I could only have a certain amount of good feelings. And then when I got to that upper limit, or when I started to break through that upper limit, I would do something, and the something could be as simple as start worrying, something to bring myself down. Often it was worry, paranoid fantasies, or it was I would get sick, a cold, or some other kind of maybe lady sickness, I would have an accident or something that would bring me back down to the level that I was comfortable with. And when I read that book and I became aware of it, I was horrified. And I felt so sad for that little me that made that decision, that felt the need to make that decision, and so sad for the many, many years in which I had squelched my pleasure onto the music bar instead of allowing the notes to go above it. And the one thing that they recommend in the book for being able to raise your upper limit is rest. So if you feel, I had it a lot with my partner in the very earliest parts of our relationship, where I would feel so high, and I would get a little scared because this is at the point when I usually do something to bring it back down. And so a nap or a break or a walk around the block or a few days apart. Luckily, we've had that because we have this middle distance relationship. So we've had that just built in. But do you think that you really didn't set an upper limit?
Oh, I certainly did. I lived much of my life with limits.
on myself. And when I say that, I told you earlier that I think that I've always been pretty easily delighted. I think that's true, but I think I placed a lot of limits on myself and a lot of constraints. I mean, my first several boyfriends when I was young, I was maybe attracted to in some comfortable way, but I didn't experience very much pleasure with them. I didn't
Mm.
experience very much exploration of pleasure, but I continued because it felt, I don't know, like maybe the only outlet I had for at least sexual pleasure. And I think I placed limits on my own pleasure by not exploring it myself or by just being in places that I didn't feel alive in and continuing to be in them. But at some point, I started to realize that there was a feeling of aliveness that I could have, a feeling, a sense of being free. And I think, I think that really came through dancing, actually. Most, yeah, most memorably, that came through dancing. And the more I would dance, the more free I felt to seek more of that feeling of aliveness, that feeling of vibrance.
When did you start dancing?
When I was in graduate school, I was a grad student trying to find ways to take breaks from studying constantly. And I took a dance class one semester, and that just opened the door for me. I started going to weekly dances and then more, and then I started going out to bars to dance with the group of friends I had made at the social dances, and we just danced everywhere. And then I wanted to dance in all sorts of ways. I wanted to bring dancing into my cohort at graduate school. I wanted to bring it into my department. I wanted to, metaphorically, not always physically, sometimes physically, but metaphorically, I would dance with people. I would come in and I would greet them in a way that felt most delightful to me.
Mm.
And I would hug them in that way. And I would, you know, when we were studying, I would gamify it and I would make it
Mm.
a little bit more alive for me. And I think that once I started doing that, it wasn't a conscious shift, but once I started doing that, I I can see now that what was happening was that I was continuing to seek that feeling of aliveness that I didn't really know very much of before that period of my life,
Mm.
I would say. Perhaps I saw little glimpses of it, but it really came in full blossom for me when I was dancing and interacting with so many different people on the dance floor in such a vibrant way. It was so joyful,
Mm.
you know?
I love hearing about your delight in this way because then it doesn't seem like magic that only you possess, but it seems like the seeds that you watered.
Mm, yeah.
This is what you cultivated. Everybody has capacity for delight. Even
Oh,
the most
yes.
curmudgeonly person
Oh, certainly.
at some point had capacity for delight,
Mhm.
and maybe they didn't water it, but you do.
I had the most fun, I would say, once I was feeling just alive all the time, almost all the time, which was incredible to feel in graduate school when most people are pretty bogged down and maybe curmudgeon-y. I started, full of stress and all that. I started to work with an elderly population in my practice. I would bring this insane amount of delight to this shared experience with a person who might be otherwise curmudgeon-y. And I would lead them around in their wheelchair and I would sing to them and talk to them about the jokes I had learned and ask them about things that might have brought them delight in the past. And I realized that speaking with an intention of sharing delight was just, it was glorious.
When you said that about greeting people, we had an event here. It was one of the art shows, one of the photo shows, and one of our housemates asked me, he said, my friend Anna is coming. Here's what she looks like, and he showed me a picture of her. Or he texted me because he wasn't here. And I was greeting people, right? I was greeting people at the door. And he said, when you see her, will you go, Anna! Hi, I'm so glad you're here. Which, as you know, is how he greets pretty much everybody.
Every time.
Right? And you were just talking about greeting people like that, right?
Yes.
As though you're dancing with delight.
Yes.
And every time I have seen her since, and to be perfectly honest, actually, the second time I saw her, I didn't remember how I knew her. I just, and then as we were talking, it dawned on me, but every time she's seen me since, she said, Lila, hi.
Oh, she met you.
She
with
met
that
me
delight.
with that delight. And because his delight is so infectious, it
Mhm.
was so easy to do.
Mhm.
And what if I am the ambassadrix? What if I greeted everyone who steps in here like that? I mean, I haven't done so far, right? I've done it with some people.
Mhm. What if?
What if?
Would you be fully in your pleasure if you did that?
I don't know, honestly.
Maybe we could
Sometimes
practice.
I can practice.
Maybe we could start and just see as an experiment what it feels like for you.
Yeah, I should try it.
I wanted to say earlier that when I had this intention of sharing delight and I sort of tried to find the way that I could delight them or inspire delight in them, they would light up eventually. And it was a different thing for each person, but when they lit up, it was so rewarding because then we could both be alive and alight together.
Oh, I wanna cry.
Oh.
Oh, I was wondering what you learned about sex and relationships, the messages that you got from your upbringing.
Oof. Oh, that's a lot of heavy shit. So, the first sort of ringing in my ear message that I'm hearing even now is embarrassment, shame. Definitely embarrassment and shame. Those are, they're still there. I sensed it because when my mother told me, and I believe I had asked her the question, what is sex? Because I must have heard it from a classmate. And she had this awkward giggle and sort of almost starting and stopping with her words. And they were going to burst from her in a way that she didn't want them to. It was, she was embarrassed hearing the question and she was embarrassed explaining it. And that experience, we've been talking about experience around meaning and words, that experience with my mother was embarrassing for me as a result because she effectively showed me that this was an embarrassing thing to talk about. And, that didn't discourage my curiosity. So I think the next time it really comes up in my memory was when I had this sort of tension with a classmate who stole some drawings that I had made with a friend while we were all out at recess, and he showed them to the woman on duty outside, and she brought it to the principal, and the principal called my mother and called my friend's father. And
What were the drawings?
they were kids scratch, chicken scratch. I don't know. They had stick figures with, penises, and they were probably extended. I think they were extended like elephant trunks because I had no concept of what they were like, and I had such a vivid imagination at that time.
Were they were the
I
penis
think
elephant trunks
I
interacting
think
with?
they were probably interacting with objects or or perhaps other people, but I honestly have blocked it from my memory so intensely because what happened next was that there was so much shame around it that the words, "We won't tell your father about this," came at home. Those words came when I got home.
Oh my
And
goodness.
before coming home, I also experienced a really terrifying moment when my friend was picked up by her father, who proceeded to scream at her at the school. And that's a whole other story. But, you know, I was, from that and from my mother's words, I was pretty terrified of men and what they thought about this whole experience, whatever it was. I was just learning about it. I didn't know what sex was. And those were my first experiences with it. Fear, embarrassment, shame, almost a terrified feeling. And of course, I never wanted to speak to my parents about it after that. And, when I finally started to explore with the opposite sex, when I had my first boyfriend, my parents shamed me for that too. And didn't
How?
want him around. They would almost neg me, if you know that terminology. I don't know how else to say it,
Put
but
you down.
they would put me down about the fact that I had a boy in my life who I was interested in and who I wanted to go and spend time with alone. And they didn't want him to come over, and they didn't they kept telling me that they didn't want him to be in my life, that he wasn't good for me, that they didn't really get to know
I was about to
him.
say, do you think that would have been with any boy?
I,
Any
I
boy
have a
that you were intimate
feeling,
with?
I suspect that is the case,
He's
but
not
I
good for
don't know
you,
for sure.
meaning at your age,
That's
boys are
just
not good for you.
that's the sense I got.
Mm.
Yes, and in fact, even in my 20s, my mother hadn't accepted my sexuality, and
What part of it? Just the fact that you are
just the
sexual?
fact that I am a sexual being.
So, what were you raised by religious people? Were you taught that sex before marriage is illicit, is a sin?
Yeah, I was raised Catholic, and my mother was a pretty devout Catholic when I was very, very young, and she would bring me to church when I was very young, and I remember learning quite a bit about religious practices, and I do remember learning that sex before marriage was a sin, and that I also remember thinking that it was a sacred thing, that it was something that should be kept like a secret. It felt like a secret. And it felt like a secret not just to other people I hadn't met yet, but also to my family and even to myself. It felt like a secret from myself. I didn't know what it was like inside of myself, and I shouldn't know because it was a secret and it was kept under lock and key until a wedding band opened it up, you
Oh.
know? So those were my first experiences with it.
When you first said the word sacred, I thought, I imagine that you still feel that way, that it's sacred in a way. But then you changed it to secret. You don't feel the same way about those two.
No, my first thoughts were the word secret because of the guilt and the shame and the embarrassment. And later, it began to evolve glimmer by glimmer toward, almost as though it were like choosing another path, with baby steps toward sacred, because it does still feel like a space that it does still feel like something I only share with people whom I feel I trust deeply. And it's much more easy for me to trust quickly now. But it is sacred now and not a kept secret. And there has been that shift. It's taken years and years to shift it. And lots of unfortunate dismissing of my family's disapproval and a, turning away from that and turning toward like-minded people.
Turning toward delight, I imagine.
Turning toward delight.
Part of your turning
Thank
toward
God for
delight.
Thank God for pleasure.
I just had an image of you really as a flower, and turning away from, the fumes and turning towards the sunlight, and then slowly starting to open, as in a time-lapse video.
And I do still feel that, religion did influence me quite a bit in negative ways when I was young, but there were some positive influences too. And I still feel that there is something higher, something divine, but actually divine around
orgasm.
Something that is sacred. Yes. around orgasm.
Around meeting someone in a transcendent space that feels like it's beyond the two of your bodies, that feels like it's cosmic, it's stratospheric, it's stardust.
Absolutely. It feels sacred now because I'm able to go places that feel, yes, stellar, cosmic, outside of myself, that I can be bigger than myself and connect with everything around me, as well as this other person, or through them even, or they through me. There's something bigger than us that feels incredible.
It reminds me of this John Patrick Shanley monologue that I used to do all the time. I'll put it in the show notes. So I was curious how did you even hear about polyamory in the first place?
Oh. Oh, man. So it happened on the dance floor. I approached a group of particularly uproarious dancers. And as I was walking toward them, I saw a gorgeous woman walking directly toward me. As soon as she saw me, she came toward me and she said to me, "Hello, you're enchanting."
Oh!
And she looked so directly into my eyes that I thought she was actually seeing me, even a version of me I didn't know existed inside somewhere in me. And I said, "Hello," a little shyly. And her name, I found out later, was Sweet Chelsea Morning Days.
Oh my goodness. I'm getting a little hot. I'm getting a little sweaty.
And to this day, every time I say her name and every time I hear it, I just come back to that moment where she said, "Hello, you're enchanting," and showed me my new world. This whole world opened up for me that I never knew existed before. And it was as though I had taken that limit that I thought I had already raised substantially, and perhaps I had, but it raised again.
Maybe doubled it.
Exponentially so. She started bringing me to, I'm going to tell you so much here. She started bringing me to her home, and she'd bring men over and we'd enjoy them together. We became a regular, like, double trouble. We were like-minded little enchantresses, and we were such a good team. So since then, she actually gave me the idea of polyamory, but she didn't give me a good definition of it. She practiced something that was different than what polyamory became for me. And it shaped itself over time, the meaning of the word. The concept at first felt to me like, I'm sure like it does for any person, glorious. You can love anyone you want and however many you'd like at once. Beautiful. I'd love to try that out. But it seems idyllic. And I liked that. I liked that it seemed idyllic. I liked that it seemed like a paradise. And some part of me thought, no, this can't actually work. And another part of me thought, well, maybe people just don't want to believe that it's possible to have the ideal. And it was a sort of rocky start for me getting to know, what I didn't like about her definition of it and what I did. And then I learned over the course of many years what it meant for me through reading and many discussions, many different people, especially lovers.
Can you sum that up, what it meant for her and what it's come to mean to you?
I suppose that I can't speak for her and really say what it meant for her, but in my perspective, in my eyes, she saw it as this freedom to explore her sexuality and her sensuality with any person. And she was doing that, but it was more, it looked to me more like very surface level play, sort of not quite like polyamory, unless she really felt deep love for each of those people, and more like fooling around. I hate to, I hate to put a negative vibe on that. She may actually have loved each person she interacted with, but it wasn't my style.
But you're using the love to distinguish it, right? Because polyamory, polyamorous, literally means many loves.
Yeah. I think what she was practicing was more non monogamy. She was doing her thing. And for me, polyamory meant, well, there's this sacred part of me that I only share with certain people. And I want to be able to share that with one person, maybe two people, maybe three people for the long term, and have only those people share it. And that it was deeper than what I would share with the others. And if I loved them, I wanted to see how deeply I could love them and continue to discover how deeply I could love them over time, and that I could love them along with another. You know?
I'm embarrassed to admit this to you, but when I took the very first installment of Kenneth and Jana's Sex ID workshop,
Mm-hmm.
I discovered that I have a belief that it's not all right to love more than one person at a time. That it is acceptable to have sex with more than one person and other play, that's acceptable. And yet intellectually, I do not believe that. Obviously, I deeply love many people, but romantically, I have this value that I don't know if it's worth dismantling or trying to disrupt or unravel. It hasn't yet happened in my life. Usually what happens is that there's only room for one at the top of my emotional life and affections and attention and maybe even sometimes bordering obsession. There's only room for one. And so that person plays on this primary track with the volume turned up in my mind. And then if I wanted to be with someone else or I wanted to cheat, they pushed that person out of that top space.
Wow.
And I started thinking, they would occupy me, like the property of a gas where it expands to fill the available space.
Yeah.
That next person who was at the top for me would occupy me.
That is fascinating. This image that you're creating for me, I can see that. And I believe that I felt that also in at some point. And when I was learning about polyamory from this beautiful first female love I had, I started to see myself, if we're talking about, visuals here, as multifaceted in a way that I had sort of different beams connecting me to different people who I cared for deeply. And and each of those beams was distinct. Like maybe one of those was a space, if you want to, call it a space, a connection through dance, a connection through intellectual discussion, a connection through physical comfort, one for inspiration creatively, creative inspiration, artistic, projects. And I started to see that I was able to, I started to see myself in this multifaceted way that had room for different people for different reasons. And not just for one reason, one person for one reason, but one person for many of those facets of myself, and another for some of those and some others. And that was a revelation I had, I think, was that this person fits here and here and here, and that person fits here too and there. And that's how I started to invite different people into my life, because I needed all of those things and I couldn't have all of those needs met by just one.
I feel deeply sad about that. That idea. That thing about the enough. It's a deep trigger for me.
Mm-hmm.
Not being enough, not being good enough. And I intellectually love the idea. It sounds so expansive and truly loving and glorious.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, there's something that feels so awful about saying, well, you don't give me this thing, so I'm going to go get it somewhere else.
Oh, interesting. But see, the beams, they came from me, and that person would add to that facet of myself, but it was still just a facet of me, and it wasn't empty when they left. It was just that when they were there, they added to it.
But do you really think that's true, that one person can't possibly add to all the facets of you?
Yes. I think that's why I need very close female and male friends. I think that's why I need friend family. I think that's why community is so important to me, because I don't think that for any person, every single facet of themselves can be completely appreciated by one other person, because we are all so different and so complex beings. We have such complexity and we have so much distinction. I mean to say that I think it would be limiting if we just explored so many facets of ourselves with one anyway.
It is limiting, and people have done it for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you'll be polyamorous for the rest of your life?
Absolutely. Without a doubt. I my first female love practiced very differently from me in that she would tell everyone she was dating, including me, that she was monogamous now. And she did that a couple of times before
What?
she really broke my heart. That she would go through phases. And I remembered that. And I remember how much it broke my heart that she would just stop contact with me because she found a person who she felt would give her everything. And she stopped connecting with those that she was already connected to, cut us off, basically. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't ever want to do that. If I find someone who is the world to me and can't accept and celebrate the fact that I'm able to love many simultaneously. I mean, the time commitment for that is alone something to really celebrate. It takes a lot of work.
A lot.
It's a lot of energy and time and effort, and I love celebrating that. And if a person I feel is amazing can't celebrate that, then they're a little less amazing to me. If I'm able to show them this is my world and they feel similarly enraptured the way that I was when I first learned about it, and they want to learn more, and they're interested and they're open, if they're open to that, then we could grow together. But without that, the person would be limiting to me, because I feel that this is a space, this being identifying as polyamorous is a place where I can grow incredibly, exponentially. And with every person I meet, I grow a little bit more. And you used the analogy of a flower earlier. You used the image of a flower to describe me. If I am a flower, I keep growing taller and bigger and wider and accepting more and more sunlight. And with each person, each beam, each person I interact with, I'm able to grow a little more. I value that so deeply in my core that meeting someone who was not willing to grow with me in that way wouldn't interest me as much.
And you don't
Romantically.
experience jealousy?
Oh, I do. I do. That comes up sometimes.
As I'm thinking now about starting to play with others with my partner for the first time, just even landing seriously on the idea, this impending, looming jealousy is what keeps me from wanting to jump right in.
Oh, wow. So it's not there yet, but you think it will be.
Yes.
It hasn't arrived, but it's looming.
It's looming because of my triggers and my wanting to feel chosen and feel valued in that being chosen. And many people over the years have said to me some variation of, you have to choose yourself. And I've been working on it. I'm working on it.
I see it.
I'm definitely working on it. But yeah, it feels there's a looming. There's a looming.
Well, I understand. I mean, jealousy is it's a big topic in itself, but I will say that, with all the beautiful things we've been talking about, I'm human. I have many loves, and I have fear of abandonment. I have fear of being somehow less exciting, less desirable than another woman. I have, and these are things I have experienced, they come up in moments and I acknowledge them and I try to, you know, write about them and give them the attention that they want, those feelings. And it feels good to share them verbally, not necessarily empathically. Not everyone feels it exactly the way that I do, but you know, some partners are receptive to me sharing that I felt a certain way, and that feels like a way we can grow together too. Like more vulnerably, we can grow more deeply connected.
I just realized that I think I feel afraid that that jealousy would consume me and poison how I feel about my lover.
Mm. It's certainly a possibility, and it has happened for me. And I've lost a love because of it. But in another way, I've gained.
I feel envious of you fairly often for your gifts of really free-flowing sexual charm and delight and ability to love so many people. And to me, it was seemingly without much pain, just ability to love so many people and explore your sexuality and your desires very freely. And then sometimes I can feel protective of my partner around you because I know you have that aura. It doesn't stop me from feeling close to you, this envy. But I feel it, and I also feel embarrassed by it.
I hear you, and I appreciate you sharing that. I think that part of the reason I intellectually think that part of the reason I am able to love some so freely and deeply is because on the other side, I also feel pain so intensely when I feel it. I sometimes get lost in it and am gone from the world for a while. And I really go to some deep, painful depths. It's not pretty. And I can get ugly too in those moments. Oh. But I think that that pain of loss that I fairly recently felt, that the intensity of that pain is necessary, I think. And I was once really afraid of loss, and I think that when I said that in one way I've gained, I think that I've gained this understanding that pain is actually one of my greatest, if not my greatest, teacher. Because you can only do one thing from those depths. You can really only rise.
Intellectually, I understand that you can lose your partner and you can lose your partner's love regardless of whether you're polyamorous or not.
Exactly.
So many people cheat. So many people leave their partners in monogamous relationships. So many people lie or squelch attractions to other people. And it certainly doesn't protect you from loss, and I know that. And I'm very turned on by images of myself with my partner and another woman. Or recently I have also thought about my partner and another man and myself, which are fantasies I didn't used to have. I've had the male, female, female fantasies for a long time, and the male, male, female fantasies are recent.
That's exciting.
They're very exciting, but just as I was thinking about from Jana and Kenneth's workshop about the different kinds of fantasies, some are the ones that you really want to just stay fantasies that really turn
Absolutely.
you on in fantasy land, and some would be too triggering in real life, and some would be too out there in real life, or whatever it is. And then there are some that you really want to do and just haven't done yet, and there are some that you do, and you still fantasize about them.
I think, if I may, that part of what is so incredibly, we were talking about aliveness earlier, and that risk that you take, that risk of experiencing negative emotions, that risk that your partner might feel differently about you, whether it's differently not as good, differently better, different, somehow things will change. That risk, that knowing that the unknown is coming, that change, you don't know what it is yet, the risk is what inspires such feelings of aliveness. I've found.
And arousal.
Yes.
There's an obstacle to that, and Esther Perel's equation for excitement is desire plus obstacle.
Mm-hmm. I love that you just quoted Esther Perel. She's one of my heroines.
Brilliant woman.
So brilliant.
She said that she's had many relationships over the course of her lifetime, but with just one man.
Yes. That's one of my absolute favorite quotes from her. It is the favorite quote from her. It's my favorite.
Yet it's so different from what you believe in.
It's not, actually. It's really not. I'm experiencing one of those myself right now. I believe it's possible to have many relationships with the same person, even when you're having relationships with different people. My relationships shift all the time. Well, we may begin as friends. We almost always begin as friends before we become lovers. And because it's important to me to feel like there's genuine care exchanged.
Me too.
Shared. And then we might shift to a partnership where we're making some life decisions together. And sometime later, we might shift to another thing, maybe lovers, where we really only see one another in passing on weekends when they're in town, and we share magical weekends together, and then they go back home. And sometimes we've shifted from there to just friendships where we don't share sexual connections. We still have some romance because almost all of my friendships are romantic in some way. Because of the beauty we can both, feel and share.
That makes so much sense to me about you, that all of your friendships are romantic in some way. Even ours is romantic in some way.
It is. It really is. So I was talking to you about pain and how it's been such a good teacher for me, because I feel that with each deep love I've lost and have felt pain for in that loss, I feel a greater capacity to love on the other side of it, knowing that there's that risk, and diving in anyway feels even more freeing when I'm faced with this massive potential with every new person who I feel really excited about, and we all have that sort of fear, like, what if they don't like me as much as I like them, or what if things sort of go up in flames and then disappear, and I started to realize one of the most educational things I watched around this was In Celebration of Short-Term Relationships.
Huh.
And I sort of connected this to Esther Perel and her thoughts about having more than one relationship with the same person. And I thought, okay, so maybe I can love this person deeply and fully. And even when it's short lived, I'll know that they have somehow contributed incredible beauty to who I am now. And I wouldn't be who I am now if it wasn't for them.
I've heard them called comets. They
Mm,
blaze across your life and then
yes. And I've had my share of those.
I bet you've been a comet for many people as well.
I wonder, perhaps. I imagine I must have been. And I love it. I love the feeling of adventure with each new love and loss. I love the feeling of aliveness in the incredible joy and delight and pleasure and in the intense, horrible pain. I feel alive. Every time I feel more alive, or at least I return to feeling vibrantly alive.
I know how much my partner values adventure and how he, the other day, was speaking about being together with me as kind of, well, stick with this and see how it plays out kind of a thing. I think as an addict, even a recovering one, he has those tendencies, right? The desire for the adrenaline rush, the adventure, the dopamine hit. And that's going to show up in all realms. And I think that's why he's so eager to start exploring group sex.
The thrill of it.
Yeah, because he maybe feels the need for the thrill. And I do see how it could rev me up too, how I could also get way more excited and have that adrenaline rush, and how it could rev us up when we're together as well. Having the memory of that together.
Most certainly will.
But I also have this image of watching him with another woman, and when I fantasize about it when I'm masturbating, it's really exciting. And then when I think about it when I'm not masturbating, it hurts.
Do you want to go deeper there? What hurts?
The knowledge that someone else can please him in a way that I can't.
And what if that were true?
It is true, but right now it's not in my face.
And what if it was true that that person could show you something that you didn't know, and then you could try that yourself?
Wouldn't be the same. Won't be the same excitement of novelty.
Mm-hmm.
I think he has a novelty drive rather similar to Kenneth's, though he hasn't indulged it the way that Kenneth has.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's in recovery. So he's trying not to use anything as a drug.
Do you have a novelty drive?
I have some. I don't know how strong it is. I love to travel.
Mm-hmm.
And I love to travel alone so that I meet new people and meet people who otherwise wouldn't approach me if I was with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
But if I go to a restaurant and I know what I absolutely love there, probably that's what I'm going to order.
Mm-hmm.
I won't try new things just because they're new.
Yeah.
It's not the newness. There has to be some other draw. Exciting and new, stimulating and new.
Mm-hmm. Are you afraid that something will change between the two of you?
I am.
Even if it were to change in a positive way?
I suppose I don't really believe that it can change for the positive
I see.
from dating others or having sex with others.
Mm-hmm.
Even if intellectually I think, sure, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Makes perfect sense that, you can revamp your attraction to your lover by having another sexy experience.
Mm-hmm. I'm hearing you say, I'm not enough.
Yeah, I think that's the core of my challenge in my entire life is talking back to that voice or changing that voice or
Mm-hmm.
loving myself as that voice is in me or caring for myself even though it's there.
Yeah. Well, you're not alone in that feeling. If that's any comfort to you, I've certainly felt not enough frequently, and it does come up in moments. And then I remember, because it's an effort to remind myself, but I do remember that there are things I can do that no one else can.
Maybe not no one else, but
Not in the way that I can. My body physically feels completely different than another person's body. To be on top of, to be under, to be hugged by, to be cuddled by, to be touched by, to be kissed by, to be charged with. That is completely unique. And I have discovered through experience that even with a multitude of other people, there's some kind of draw that brings people back to me, even after they haven't been with me for a long time, and then they go and explore many, many, many others. Something keeps them coming back. And I think it's that uniqueness.
Or is it that they just like variety?
Maybe. I like variety too, so I can't really, I don't know. Maybe it is. But that they can still say that they really enjoy me. And I can imagine that your lover really enjoys you. Really enjoys you.
I hope so.
And even if your lover were to enjoy someone else, that wouldn't make it true that wouldn't make it that he wouldn't enjoy you any longer.
It's so hard for me to emotionally understand. Intellectually, I'm totally there. I got it. Of course.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it doesn't diminish the feelings that he has about me. It's a different thing, a separate thing that he has with somebody else, like his friendships or his family relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Intellectually, I completely get it.
Mm-hmm.
And then emotionally, it says, but of course it does. Of course it diminishes.
I feel inclined to cuddle you. May I?
Mm-hmm. of equipment. I don't want to be limited or limiting to somebody else's love.
This is really challenging. Any feeling of safety. And that's scary every time.
And I know, again, intellectually, that nothing is ever safe. Nothing is ever safe. Our planet could end. Anyone could die at any moment. Intellectually, I understand. Everything is constantly shifting. No relationship is ever static. The way you feel about someone fluctuates from day to day, even when you love them. And I still feel so scared.
Well, it's scary every time. I won't deny that. I think it sounds like diving in and facing it might be a way to go, especially given all of the incredible support you have around you while you're going through a scary process. You have community, and you have home, and you have love. And if something happens that is scary, you can turn to that community, that home, that love.
Yeah, I know I have that. I'm very grateful for that. And then I suppose if I didn't like it, didn't feel happy, didn't feel comfortable, I could try to change it back. But things don't usually go back, do they? It's like once you've broken the vase, you can't put the vase back together. I mean, maybe you can and fill it in with gold like the Japanese pottery, but
I think it's also that once you've grown a little, you can't ungrow. Once you've learned, no one can take that knowledge away. And yeah, once you've grown, you can't ungrow.
I don't want to give some sort of impression that polyamory is a higher thing, a better thing than monogamy. I don't believe that to be true.
No, I don't either.
I believe that different styles are better for different humans, and that it might change and it might shift throughout the course of your life, and much of the deepest pain and trauma comes from people knowing what they wanted at a certain point and deciding that that must be what they want forever until they die, and it changing and them refusing to change with it, or refusing to acknowledge that it's changed, or refusing to tell the person that they're with that it has changed. And I do think that's one thing that people who are practicing ethical non-monogamy do beautifully, is that they continue to communicate about the shifts and communicate often about the shifts in their emotional life and their desires.
Yeah, I've seen that too. I've heard that.
My partner has said that he thinks I'm a closet polyamorist and a closet lesbian. And I said, a lesbian is someone who only likes and wants to fuck women. And that is clearly not me, as evinced by what we are here to do today.
Oh my.
But I know that in my fantasy life, what gets me going, and sometimes what I need to achieve orgasm, is that image. of having another lover involved.
Sounds like there's something budding there. Maybe I can help you find a person who feels a little bit risky, but mostly safe.
You can be my poly Sherpa.
Yes. Or rather, your playful Sherpa, since I think it's possible to develop love for a person like this, but really it sounds like you're looking for a playful
my play
experience.
Sherpa.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, that is what I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
A playful experience. I don't have these fantasies about dating that person.
Mm-hmm.
If you could design all your relationships in this ideal way, how many would you have? How many regular partners and how many occasional partners?
Ooh. That would depend on so many factors. But if I lived in a home, in a house with several of my partners, I would need at least 3 partners in that home, because I would need, perhaps if I had a child with one of them, I would need at least one other to help raise that child, and that person would probably need one other to be kept company by when I'm out on a date with one of them. And perhaps they would also have a child or 2. I would probably have at least one other occasional partner with whom I had incredible sex. So I suppose an ideal number would be that 3 regular, 1 occasional, and probably other travelers sprinkled in.
A few comments.
Yeah,
A
a few
few-
comments. I'll always want comments in my life. I welcome comments. If you are one, come find me.
It won't be too hard.
Mm. Yes, I welcome adventure. So
I do too.
yes.
Why am I so blocked in this area? I know why. I don't need to ask the question.
I think there's a lot more exploration to be had here.
Morale.
Mm-hmm.
Would you tell me a story?
I'd love to. I have a good story. I have a story about someone you know.
Ooh,
Won't tell who.
juicy.
Kind of a comet in my life, actually.
Mm.
Speaking of comets. So, one weekend last spring, I spent a magical sort of getaway experience in the mountains by a lake in North Carolina. And I went into this weekend knowing that someone who I felt an intense longing for was going to be there. And I was really hoping to have some time with this person. But he informed me very gracefully and respectfully ahead of time, only days ahead of time, that someone he was fancying a great deal would be there, and he would probably be spending most of his time with her. Of course, I was disappointed to hear that, but because it was a particularly trying week with the partner I was living with too. And I just wanted a getaway, a romantic getaway. So I tried to rein in my emotions and handle myself. And while I was there, I got the most amazing opportunities to dance under the stars with all kinds of beautiful people and the most wonderful music I could ask for. The last night of that weekend, that Sunday night, I danced into the wee hours of the morning, and I still secretly hoped that I would have just a few moments with this very special person at 4:30 in the morning as I saw him take his lover by the hand and lead her into the night. I thought, well, there went my last chance. And I had so skillfully been able to dance through my emotions for that weekend. And I felt really proud of myself for being able to do that and really just feel through what I was feeling and turn it into this beautiful dance. At that moment, I just sort of let it release in another form, and tears streamed down my face as I helped one of the cooks for the weekend clean up some of the things that had been left out for that early morning breakfast bunch. And he noticed this, and he turned and said, "Are you all right?" And I said, "Yeah, I was fine." And then I said, "No, actually I'm not, but it's okay." And he said, "Do you want to talk about it?" I said, "No." And then he said, "Well, do you want to sit down for a bit?" And I agreed to. And I hoped that he would be okay with me just sitting in silence next to him. And he was. And then he turns to me and says, "Maybe you should jump in a lake." And I thought, what the hell kind of advice is that? At the time, I thought he was crazy. And I said, "It's freezing out. It's below 40 degrees. The water is probably just as cold." and, and he turns to me again and says, "Well, I just did." And then I noticed his hair was wet. He really had jumped in the lake that night. So, of course, being the ballsy woman I am, I couldn't just let him have jumped into a lake and then not agree to do the same in below 40-degree weather. So he said, "I have a towel, you could share it." And I thought, I really have no excuse now. He has a towel. He just jumped in. I better go ahead and just do it. So I let him lead me to the lake, and I thought, maybe I'll just walk up to it. That's good enough. But as I was removing every article of my clothing, there was no going back. And he says, "Okay, you ready?" And we jumped. And it was exhilarating. It was so cold, I had to get out immediately. I didn't stay in more than 3 seconds, but I still did it. And it felt pretty damn good because the moment I got out of the water, suddenly the air was warm. And it was as though my body was being encased by this warm hug, like I was being wrapped up in a hug by the air around me, by the universe that was saying, "It's okay. It's been a tough weekend. You're in a tough place, but you're going to be okay." And then this magical man wrapped me in a towel, and I stood dry, naked, staring at the sky for the next several minutes. And I started to notice things. I noticed the sound of the ducks in the distance and the geese. And then I noticed that the sky was getting a little bit lighter. And then I noticed the clouds. There were clouds in the sky then, and they were drifting by very slowly. And suddenly there were more birds chirping, and it was like each little sound, each little sight, each noticing I had was as though someone were conducting this gorgeous sunrise like a symphony, and they would just kind of call in the next piece, like the brass and then the strings and the woodwinds. And I thought, this moment is so perfectly magical I felt so much gratitude for this human standing next to me who inspired it, who inspired me to just take that moment in that little space of time. And then he did the funniest thing. He said, we had been in silence for minutes, and then he says to me, "You seem as though you would like to be held right now. Would you like that?" And I said, "Yes." And after several minutes of him holding me and us shivering a little bit, because at this point the air had grown cold again, our bodies noticed that again too. He said, "It feels like you might want to be kissed, but I don't know if, while you're in this vulnerable place, if it's a good idea for me to kiss you. But if you would like that, let me know." And I said that I would like that. And the way he had said these words so consciously, so carefully, so tenderly, was just so inspiring, so moving. And I was moved. And we kissed. We shared this lovely kiss in this gorgeous sunrise morning moment. And I started to feel gleeful, like exhilarated, right? I had been sad all weekend and struggling, and here was this wonderful human in front of me offering his lightness. So I took his hand and I said, "I think we should run back to the cabin where there's a warm shower." And we ran back as fast as we could. And when we got there, we shared a shower. And it got pretty steamy. But even after that, that sweet tenderness remained. And we shared a smile just after we got dressed, and sort of a nod, like an understanding that that was that. And we didn't need to really share that with anyone or expect anything more. That happened, and it was beautiful and encapsulated in that space of time. And I walked away from that weekend inspired. And I felt beautiful. And I didn't speak to him for many months after that. And when we did speak again, it was as friends. He was a comet in my life. Yeah, and with that, I feel truly alive. The end.
Thank you, Mirelle.
And that's horizontal.
It is, yes.
And that's what's horizontal.
I have huge appetite.
Horizontal's theme music was created by Alan Markley on Instagram as Plastic Cannons. To subscribe to Horizontal with Lila, for the show notes and links to topics we discuss in the episode, as well as some sensual horizontal photos and all the other good stuff, head to horizontalwithlila.com.
We are in the business of making people's deepest desires and dreams come true.